So who's buying right now?
1031 buyers. Unless, I only see the only deals I really see going on right now is people that sold their properties, took the gain, because they had a lot of equity in their property and a lot of upside, and they want to get out or they want to, trade out. I mean, let's face it, real estate's not forever. It can be generational, but typically people buy properties, they own them for a while, and eventually they sell them. So sooner or later, somebody's going to want to sell, and they're going to want to get their hands on the cash. They're going to want to retire. A lot of people pass away. It's part of life. A lot of partnerships dissolve. A lot of them have a specific amount of time that the partnership has to sell. So there's always going to be deals to be made, always. And the deals are coming. So I'm telling everybody to stash your cash. Because when the deals start coming, you want to be up there in line, first in line with your money, ready to go. Line up your financing. And listen, interest rates are double. So what does that mean? To really make the numbers work, you're going to have to put up more money. You're going to have to borrow less money from the bank. If I go out right now and buy down half my debt, if I go to the bank tomorrow and say, okay, here's $100 million, I'm buying down all these properties by half, my cash flow will go back to what it used to be because I'm only borrowing, half the money at a double rate. But then again, I got to come up with that cash, which is probably earning 5% right now. So, like I said, everybody's got their own portfolio. You got to sit down and you got to look at every single scenario there is and figure out what makes the most sense. Because if it makes sense, it makes money.
But when is this going to happen? Because I honestly thought this was going to happen way sooner.
No,
and we're not seeing anything. At least here in Vegas, cap rates are going up, so property values are coming down slightly, but it's barely anything. And it's to the point where I'm questioning myself, thinking, am I wrong? Is this ever going to happen?
It's going to happen. It has to happen. It's logic that has to happen. The problem is that the sellers, including myself, don't want to swallow the fact that their property is not worth what they thought it was. And it's simple math. The Lowe's that I own, you know what Lowe's is, right?
Yeah.
It's like a Home
Hardware
Depot.
store.
I own Home Depot too. Those properties, I can't get what I paid for them because I bought them at a low cap rate. It's just not going to happen. Now, am I willing to take a loss? No, I'm not willing to take a loss. So everybody's like in a limbo right now. Everybody that owns commercial property you got to wait for the bleeding to start. And it takes a little while for the bleeding to start. Okay, but once it starts bleeding, that's when it starts gushing.
Let's just say what happens in a scenario where you think there's going to be blood in the streets, but let's just assume by June of 2024, the Fed says we're lowering interest rates. We're taking them down, 50 basis points, 75 basis points, whatever it is. Interest rates start coming down. Then by 2025, all of a sudden we're at 3.5%. Isn't that going to save the market? So maybe there's a chance that nothing much is going to happen. Only the really distressed sellers are going to sell, but they're going to be outliers.
None of us have a crystal ball. But from my experience, real estate's always been a cycle. Okay, it's always been a cycle. And you just have to know when the time is right because you'll see it. Okay, if you go on 10X right now, a year ago there was nothing on 10X. Nothing. Barely nothing. Crap. Now, you're starting to see serious assets all over the country. 10X is booming with auctions. Hotels, they're dying. Why? Because people don't have the money anymore to spend. Okay? Hotels are getting crushed right now. If you're not in a hot spot where you can keep those rooms filled, I could buy hotels really cheap right now. But there's a reason why, because they're not bringing in the money. And the cost of employment has gone up. And, so, you're going to start seeing some blood. I believe, and I don't have a crystal ball. Mm-hmm. I think we got to wait to see this year end. I think when 24 comes, and then we also got politics have a lot to do with it. Okay. I think with the current administration, we're really not going in the right direction, and we're not going to go in the right direction and get lower interest rates until we see a change in government.
Now, what do you think the current president is doing about a lot of this that's bad for the real estate market?
I'm not an economic expert, but all I could say is before he was president, I think the economy and the world was in a lot better place. I mean, I'm just telling you from my life experience, interest rates were low. There was some sort of peace in the world. I think we're in a lot better shape. Okay. And that's basically my life experience. I think that the Democrats just don't understand, or they don't like taking any. They're trying to. They're not risk takers. Okay, and I don't know the level of the risk we were approaching when we had low interest rates. I'm sure there's some sort of story behind it that it could hurt us down the road, but basically all I could tell you is I was living good, and now I'm $5 million a year in the hole.
Now, how much of that, though, is Trump lowered taxes, gave businesses a whole bunch of deductions, and he really pressured the Fed to lower interest rates? So how much of the economy was really just there's more money flowing into the economy, business owners were making a lot more money, and taxes were lower? So do you think maybe that's more of like a short-term sort of deal where if we lowered taxes 10% now, I think we'd have a similar benefit?
I don't know how we were getting hurt. Were we raising the deficit? Is that the problem? Is that what, all the good times we're bringing? We're raising the deficit? I mean, I heard on the news the other day that we only collect, I think, $2 trillion a year in taxes. But it takes how much to run the country?
I think it was 5 or 6. No, I think it was like 5 or 6, but they collect 4. I think there was a $2 to $3 trillion a year deficit, and that's just being added to the national debt. With rates as high as they are now, I think now the national debt is costing more than defense. So now I think it's a game of chicken of how long could that continue before eventually they got to lower rates or they got to come out of pocket a ton of money.
Well, I know one thing. It's a known fact that mortgages are at an all-time low, right?
Mm-hmm.
People aren't buying homes right now. And I think that's like the foundation of people's lives. Being able to work and buy a home for your family and have some quality of life, I think is very, very important. And it's almost really much impossible for an average middle-class person now to go out and buy a property to live in. So, I don't know. I don't think it's good. And then the banks aren't making any money. Let's face it. The banks aren't making any money right now. The banks are paying you 5.5% in a money market account, right? They got to pay out a lot of money. And then nobody's getting loans at 7%. So the bank is just sitting there. Basically, it's going to hurt the banks. If they don't lower the interest rates and people don't start borrowing money, we saw what happened in Silicon Valley not too long ago, okay, it's going to get ugly. I think that, I kind of track the foreclosures, and I also track non-performing loans, and it's growing. It's growing dramatically right now, and the banks don't want nobody to know, because if word gets out that they're not collecting on the loans they had, then the bank's only worth what the loans are. The bank's value is the amount of loans that they have. That's their assets. And if they're not making money on those assets fall down in value. So the bank ain't worth as much as the bank used to be worth, and the stock goes down. And then we saw what happened in Silicon Valley. They went belly up. We saw a lot of banks go, I don't know, you're too young to remember, but imagine how many banks went belly up in the crash. Or what about not only banks? Look what happened to all the big stockbrokers that went belly up. Lehman Brothers.
Yeah,
they were around for 100 years, and and they were upside down.
Yeah,
mainly it's because of leverage.